when we talk about oxytocin, the first thing that if people know about it, any of the neurotransmitters, is that it's called a love hormone or a cuddle hormone. But there are many, many other things that it is doing. If we talk about just what happens in social bonding, what we feel about somebody else, and what happens after that, the entire process of reproduction, oxytocin is required at all levels. It gives the mother this extreme feeling of being attached to the baby, that the mother can do anything for the baby. The recovery of the mother postpartum, the uterus going back to its normal size, is also dependent on the levels of oxytocin. So, low levels of oxytocin have been associated with this lack of social bonding, that we just cannot feel bonded towards anybody. Oxytocin also plays a role in how we perceive pain. The same amount of pain might feel different to different people. The social bonding that happens in people, the feeling of trust that happens, and probably the most non romantic thing to say is that love is because of oxytocin that is released in the brain. That is the truth, sorry. But ever wondered what happens when a person falls in love? What is that feeling of love? What is the feeling of love that a mother feels for her baby when the newborn is just in her hands for the first time? What are new parents experiencing? What are all these feelings about? Let us deep dive into this feeling of love, of bonding, of this wonderful emotion called oxytocin today. So, this is the neurotransmitter we are going to focus on in today's podcast with our co host, Sujata Gokhale. Welcome,
Hi,
Sujata.
Rashmi. Sending you hugs from here.
Yes, lots of hugs, lots
For
of love
that,
and hugs.
yes. So, dear viewers, welcome to our series of podcasts on the neurotransmitters. If you have missed out on the earlier episodes, please click on the description below and you'll find the links there. So, click and find the other podcasts on our neurotransmitters. So, today, like Rashmi mentioned, we're going to talk about, oxytocin, also called as the love hormone. Oxytocin is a neuropeptide. It's essential for social bonding and reproduction, but currently has garnered significant, scientific attention because of its varied mechanisms, its psychological impacts, and therapeutic potential. So, this hormone is produced by the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland, but has been always connected to childbirth and parenting and lactation. So, Rashmi, can you explain oxytocin, its function, and why it's so important?
Yes. So it has these very beautiful functions that you just mentioned. But let me just state that when we talk about oxytocin, the first thing that if people know about it, any of the neurotransmitters, is that it's called a love hormone or a cuddle hormone. So people think of it as when we fall in love, that is what is released in our brain that makes us go to this high, and that is the exact chemical that is making us feel all of these feelings. So that is probably the only thing what people know if they actually know about this. But there are many, many other things that it is doing. If we talk about just what happens in social bonding, what we feel about somebody else, and what happens after that, the entire process of reproduction, oxytocin is required at all levels. It is required for the bonding with the partner, for entire process of even reproduction, of getting pregnant, and of the embryo developing, what happens in the uterus during childbirth, how the labor is regulated, how uterine contractions are regulated. Oxytocin is very important for the uterine contractions. So even after childbirth, what happens is oxytocin is required for the mother to bond to the child. So a lot of oxytocin is actually produced at that time. So we'll break it down even further. But this is so amazing that it is regulating the entire process of reproduction. That's not the only thing that it does. but it does so many things in this process that we need to know what it is. We need to know how to take care of it. We need to know how to have good enough levels of it in order to have a healthy life that is full of love, that is full of, satisfaction. So, this is why we need to know about it. Now, if we break down this process of reproduction, being attracted to someone is something that oxytocin is playing a major role in. And then the entire process of how people get pregnant, after that how this is regulated, labor is regulated, oxytocin is secreted to get the uterus to contract so that the baby is pushed outside. And when the baby is pushed outside, the process of this pushing also increases even more oxytocin to be released in the mother's brain, in the mother's hypothalamus, so that is making it. And that not just stimulates lactation after the baby is born, but it
Yes.
gives the mother this extreme feeling of being attached to the baby, that the mother can do anything for the baby. This is because so much oxytocin is released in that particular process. So, if we think of what actually happens in labor, in case of induced labor, for those of the women who cannot go through labor on their own because of some physiological or any other reasons, the induction or something else that is happening with the baby, the induction is done with something called pitocin. That's a medication that is given, and it is a form of oxytocin. That is what is helping the labor progress. Even there are
Ah,
injections of oxytocin given to mothers right after childbirth to help delivery of the placenta so that it comes out faster and the delivery process is much smoother. And of course, that helps with lactation later on so that the mother is
yes.
able to produce good enough amounts of breast milk, which is again extremely healthy for the baby. We have talked about all of these. So, oxytocin is taking care of the entire process of reproduction, right from the beginning, from bonding with the partner to the feeling of pure love that the mother has for the child after childbirth. So, that is one extremely important function that oxytocin has. In addition to that, it has other functions that, it regulates mood, it regulates what happens in the gut, it regulates our immune system, it interacts with all other neurotransmitters. So there are many other functions that we can talk about it, like we talked about the other neurotransmitters. But this was a major chunk of what oxytocin does, the entire process of reproduction.
I believe oxytocin even, modulates cardiovascular parameters, blood pressure,
Yes,
heart
blood pressure.
rate,
Yes,
yes, gastrointestinal motility and gut function. So, I mean, these are really lot of functions for a
yes. If we go
hormone
into
that
the
is dubbed as
details, it is
love
going to
hormone.
impact. Yes, it is going to impact a lot of other parameters also, because whenever we talk about any neurotransmitters, all of them are impacting some aspect of sleep, some aspect of digestion, some aspect of our immunity, some aspect of our sleep, and all the other processes, because they are talking to the vagus nerve, they are talking to the gut brain axis, or majority of them are produced in the brain itself, and they are talking to all other organs. So there are multiple functions, but this major, the one I mentioned, is such a major
Yes,
function of oxytocin, starting from people falling in love to this entire process. Because as a
delivering of
mother, I
fetus.
remember feeling this, I had this question, that how is it possible for a mother to feel such kind of immense love for the baby. I was not able to fathom the depth of this emotion and how it was going to happen before my children were born. But after they were born, I realized how strong that feeling is, how strong and how potent that chemical is, how important its function is. It plays a role in every single process. It is
Truly, I mean,
pure magic.
truly. Yes, the whole actually process, just fascinates me because it's a process where trust, empathy, love, bonding, everything happens together and you
Yes, the
become so
social bonding that
connected.
happens in
Yes,
people, the feeling of
yes.
trust that happens, and probably the most non-romantic thing to say is that, oh, love is because of oxytocin that is released in the brain. That is the truth. Sorry, but that's what happens. How people bond with each other in a society because of our oxytocin levels. When we give a hug or when there's physical touch, that releases oxytocin in our
That is
brain. How
mm,
humans have evolved. So let us talk about the other things that oxytocin is doing apart from its function in reproductive health. So as I mentioned, it impacts intimacy. It also impacts reproductive behavior and what happens after childbirth. So not only is the mother's bond with the baby impacted by oxytocin, but fathers who have high levels of oxytocin are also much more engaged, much more nurturing. So this feeling of nurturing, this feeling of caring for the infant actually comes from oxytocin, which is very, very important. It's a good survival thing that is required for humans because the baby in humans cannot take care of itself. In other animals, it's very different. In humans, the parents need to take care of the baby. It also impacts the regulation of our food intake, how much food we eat, our behavior related to hunger. It is impacted by oxytocin. Oxytocin also plays a role in how we perceive pain. The same amount of pain might feel different to different people, and that is dependent on the levels of oxytocin that are present in our brain because it acts on the central nervous system. It actually enhances pain tolerance. Some people who have a high pain tolerance probably have a high level of oxytocin. If we talk about the other health benefits of oxytocin, they play a very important role in heart health. It is very protective of heart health. It reduces blood pressure. It reduces inflammation in the heart. That's how it is protecting us against heart disease. And if we talk about other functions like emotional regulation, it helps us regulate our emotions. It keeps anxiety and stress very low. So there are some very, very important functions that we can talk about in oxytocin.
even very, I mean, these days researchers have found that they are good at pain management as well.
Yes,
So pain management as well comes as part of oxytocin release. The more you have those oxytocin released, pain management also can be looked into. Yeah, I mean, what a hug cannot do. I mean, if you are
yes. So
really in that kind of
coming
a
to
mood,
that,
hug just changes everything. So look at the
yes,
oxytocin working for you.
yes, it is because oxytocin is produced, and that is what is giving this feeling of relief. It is giving that feeling of the stress going down. It is giving that feeling of yes, everything is okay. We have somebody who is going to take care of whatever our feelings
Yeah,
are.
the feeling of being
And
cared
if
for.
we
Yes.
Yes. So coming to that, when we talk about this feeling of being cared for and the social interaction or bonding with other people, one important point that I want to mention is that yes, while it plays such important roles in reproduction, so we are talking about young people or a mother and a baby or parents and their child or a couple, but we fail to address what happens in the elderly. So, when we talk about senior citizens being in hospices or being alone on their own, we always say that when we talk about the gut microbiome, I remember saying this that the gut microbiome is extremely poor, the diversity is reduced in senior citizens who live on their own, who are in these hospices or who do not have people to care for them, who are not living with their families. It is not just the gut microbiome diversity that reduces. Just think about what might be happening to their oxytocin levels when they do not have any social interactions. Senior
Yes.
citizens have very limited social interactions. And what
Yes.
does that do to their oxytocin levels? What is it going to do to their overall health? It is
True.
something that is a big concern.
Yes, we need to add that factor when we deal with geriatric patients. Yes, very much true
Yes,
there, Rashmi. So
yes,
now that you have mentioned the gut microbiome and its diversity, so I'll just have this question. I have this question in mind. So oxytocin is produced in the hypothalamus in the brain. Okay. Now I'm curious to understand if like some of the new neurotransmitters we talked about, serotonin, melatonin, and then GABA, these are all having, they are produced in the gut. So is oxytocin also produced in the gut, or what role does the gut microbiome have to play in the production of the oxytocin?
So I'm going to say that, if you look at any of the publications from the past few years or the ones before that, you will always find that oxytocin is produced in the brain, it is produced in the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland. But there are very rare references of it. It was a very recent one from last year, or recent publication, where I saw that strain called Lactobacillus reuteri, which is a known probiotic strain. It actually stimulates the intestinal cells to produce oxytocin. So that was the first reference that I found of the gut microbiome actually playing a role in increasing the levels of oxytocin. So it is just not possible that the gut microbiome is not doing anything. It is doing things in everything that we can think about. So this is a standard question that I think is going to figure in all of our podcasts.
Yes.
As I expected, and I'm sure you did too, it does play a role not just in the production of oxytocin, but also in how the oxytocin receptor functions, how the other neurotransmitters are interacting with oxytocin. And we know that all of the neurotransmitters are, some of them are either crossing the blood brain barrier and functioning, acting directly on the brain, or they are acting via the vagus nerve on the brain. So whatever they are doing, they are also modulating the response of oxytocin. So if we talk about serotonin or dopamine or short chain fatty acids or any of these other neurotransmitters, the gut microbiome has a significant role in their synthesis, and it has a significant role in how they interact with oxytocin. So while it might not be directly to the greatest extent like it is for other neurotransmitters, it does influence how oxytocin is reacting, how oxytocin is functioning in our body. So the gut microbiome has a very important role to play in that.
Great there. I mean, because we always knew that oxytocin is, generated or produced in the brain. The connect between the microbiome and the secretion of the oxytocin is now coming up. Researchers are finding that, there is a link between the two. So that then leads to, the next question that I would like to ask, that if there is an imbalance in the oxytocin levels in a person, do you see disorders, any kind of disorders that could be, occurring in our human body, anything, psychological disorders, neurological disorders, any disorders or health issues that because of the imbalance in the oxytocin in our body? Have you heard of researches that which has shown a correlation between dietary habits and those dietary habits influencing the oxytocin levels, such that they are in an imbalanced state, going on to cause disorders? So have you seen those kind of, or have you read those kind of researches?
Yes, so very important question again. Whenever we are talking about anything, how does it impact our health? How does it impact our mood? Is very important. So low levels of oxytocin have been associated with this lack of social bonding, that we just cannot feel bonded towards anybody. The Probably the mother cannot feel the same kind of immense love that she should feel normally when oxytocin levels are normal. Not being able to care for the infant is something that can happen. It also has an effect in how people socialize because they cannot bond emotionally with anybody. And these are just social things. We might not think this is important, but it impacts our mental health, our physical health in many different ways. Now, coming back to the mother, again, because oxytocin impacts the entire process of reproduction, it begins right from a couple conceiving. So, not feeling anything, not feeling attachment towards a person can impact the whole process. Even after the baby is in the womb, how the baby travels through the vagina, how the delivery happens, how the uterine contraction happens, are very much regulated by oxytocin. So low levels of oxytocin are not going to be able to facilitate this entire process. So it will influence that, and it can lead to higher levels of c-section or higher levels of intervention in that case. After the baby is born, the feeling of the mother, that it's the mother can have blues, or the mother can have this feeling of being totally isolated, not being able to connect with people. That might be because of low levels of oxytocin. So this bonding with the infant is very, very important at that early stage. If that doesn't happen to the extent that it is necessary, then it is quite it is quite damaging for the mother, it is quite damaging for the infant, it is quite damaging for the entire relationship. Then we are talking about breastfeeding being impacted by levels of oxytocin. Breastfeeding also cannot be, there's not enough breast milk, there's not enough interaction with prolactin. Oxytocin and prolactin are both required for being able to make enough breast milk. So that is impacted when oxytocin is not there. The recovery of the mother postpartum, the uterus going back to its normal size, is also dependent on the levels of oxytocin. The delivery of the placenta is also dependent on oxytocin. So all of these processes are impacted quite significantly when oxytocin levels are low. And again, I mentioned about the senior citizens who probably have low levels of oxytocin because they are not socializing, because they are not getting the kind of interactions they need. And food plays a huge role, because everything that is made in our body is made from the food that we eat. If the food is not nutritious, if our gut microbiome is dysbiotic, if our other neurotransmitters are not functioning normally or are not present at normal levels, all of these are going to impact the levels of oxytocin. So this puts us at risk of all of these things that I talked about, and many other things that influence our sleep, our memory, how our gut motility is, how our immunity is, and this feeling of being isolated constantly, that not having that kind of self-worth because we feel that people just don't care about us. All of these things happen when there is low level of oxytocin in our brain, and
Actually,
probably.
certain studies have shown that mice that have been on less fiber, high fat diet
Yes.
have tend to develop that kind of autistic behavior, which is because of low levels of oxytocin, wherein, like you said, they don't have any bonding, they don't want to be in social circles, they just want to stay away by themselves. So that kind of yeah, what you say is the induced kind of autistic behavior that we see when the mice who are researched on with this kind of. So food naturally plays a big important role in keeping our oxytocin balance imbalances away. So that has to be considered for all of us, that we look at what kind of food we eat. Also, like postpartum that you discussed, even women who are dieting, who are pregnant women who are actually consuming a lot of fad foods or fast foods or junk foods that we term high fat and low fiber, they tend to have more episodes of postpartum depression as well. So that is
Yes.
also linked to oxytocin. Yes.
Yes, yes. So anything that that is impacting the kind of bonding, that kind of trust, any social situation issues that we can see in schizophrenia, in autistic or take children, in ADHD, all of these are can be related to changes or lower levels of oxytocin, definitely.
Yes.
So
So then,
that is something.
Rashmi, yeah, if that is the case, then giving supplements, do they help? Have you read about, oxytocin supplements? Of course, you talked about delivery, but besides that, have oxytocin, supplements helped different different patients for overcoming this kind of issues?
So oxytocin supplements, as you said, they are available. They are available in the form of injections or nasal sprays, and they are given only on medical prescription. They are not available over the counter. They do have serious side effects if they are continued. So when I talk about supplementing, now the best example that I can give is pitocin, which is given for inducing labor for in conditions where normal labor cannot progress for any reason. So that is something that is a one time use, so we don't expect to see a lot of side effects when it is done in that way. But it can also be given in cases of schizophrenia or autism, where in a controlled setting, where when there is lack of social bonding, when people just do not want to socialize and it is compromising the quality of their life, then under medical supervision it is given, but again in a very controlled manner. And it's not something like melatonin that you take over a month and you keep taking it and you don't see any side effects. There are side effects to taking oxytocin, because high levels of oxytocin can also be toxic. They can lead to over contraction of the uterus, hyperactivity, hypercontractibility of the uterus. It can lead to changes in blood pressure. It can lead to over trusting other people, this feeling of too much bonding towards people. It can cause a lot of changes in behavior because of that. When oxytocin levels are very high, that people cannot behave in their normal social setting. There's too much of social bonding, too much of a good of anything is not great. So that can happen. And when we talk about the other side effects, there is water retention, there's water toxicity that can happen because of this one, because of taking supplements of oxytocin. And there is, I think, low blood pressure, and there are
Yeah, heart
behavioral,
rates also. Yes, and
heart
behavioral
also goes up.
decay.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So,
So
I
supplementing is
mean,
not something that it's not available over the counter. It's not something that people should be thinking about. Instead of that, there are so many other ways in which oxytocin is so important, that there are so many other ways in which we can get it. We should focus on those ways instead.
so, viewers, if you're looking at boosting your oxytocin levels, we could recommend eat well, like we had discussed, fiber-rich food, low fat, have abundance of probiotics, eat those vitamin B-rich foods. Magnesium is good. Again, omega-3 fatty acids, then zinc in your diet. Then, of course, try yoga. That would be helps in dissipating anxiety and stress, and gives you relief from depression and gives you better sleep, or helps you overcoming that. Then, of course, share your love and affection with people who mean the most to you. Also, with elderly people, like we talk, give them that hug and you show them that you care. Spend time with friends. It can make a real big difference in your emotional well-being. Then daily meditation has been practice has been shown to improve oxytocin levels. It helps reduce stress, anxiety, mood, and you feel more compassion to yourself, others. Get yourself a pet. That also could do wonders to you. So those are some of the things that you could naturally, boost your oxytocin. So try some of these. And Rashmi, you have to add anything to these
Yes,
besides
yes.
this?
So all of these things that you said, eating dark chocolate, eating polyphenol-rich foods, eating a rainbow diet because it has polyphenols, because it has all of the fiber that you just mentioned. A balanced diet is a great solution for anything that we can talk about. So again, exercise, if we socialize, it is going to improve the levels of oxytocin. Again, talking about children who are inside alone with their digital devices, not such a great idea. Parents who are listening, if you want to boost oxytocin levels in children, encourage everything that is natural, device free, interacting with nature, socializing with friends. Having friends is extremely important. Going out and socializing with other people is extremely important. That hug is very important, as I mentioned, for oxytocin release,
Yes.
because it not just gives that feeling of love or attachment, or that's not the only thing that it is doing. It is impacting so many different processes in our health. So it is going to impact our risk of chronic diseases, of obesity, of hypertension, of all of the other things that are associated, even several forms of cancers, because of a dysbiotic microbiome, because of poor oxytocin levels. And you know what happens when there's a normal or a vaginal childbirth? It helps the baby get a wonderful microbiome from the mother. So that is a function that is facilitated by oxytocin, and it is extremely important to know, to have the right kind of oxytocin levels to support that process, so that the baby gets the best possible start. The second thing again is breastfeeding, the letdown of the milk that flows very fast. That also happens because of oxytocin levels. So that is something that helps the baby get all of those wonderful human milk oligosaccharides that are required for the gut microbiome and also for the baby. the gut microbiome digests those milk oligosaccharides, and it reduces the risk of the mother developing breast cancer because she is able to
And
breastfeed.
and let us all remember that when we are talking about in the podcast about the neurotransmitters, we are trying to show them, I mean, present them as individual neurotransmitters. But actually, when they are in our gut or in our brain, they are working together, and each of them complement one another. So that kind of symbiotic relation between all these neurotransmitters gives us that kind of mental wellness, physical wellness that we are looking. Because don't forget, the vagus nerve is having that bidirectional communication going on between the brain and the gut. So what you feel in your mind translates to what you eat, and what you eat translates to what you feel in your mind. So look at them in the whole perspective, and look at them, or look at all the neurotransmitters working together, and see how you can keep them well balanced, well regulated, so you have a good mental and physical wellness. So thank you, Rashmi, for joining us on this podcast on this oxytocin, the love hormone that we call, but it brought forth a lot of important facts for the viewers. Thank you so much, and let's see you in the next podcast.
Thank you so much, Sujata. If we can focus, we have focused on the natural ways, and definitely we need to improve oxytocin in any natural way that we can find. It's the same for all neurotransmitters, which are acting in combination with each other. Thank you, viewers, for watching till the end. If you know now what are the important functions of oxytocin, it is not just the love hormone, it is also important for pain perception, it is important for protecting your heart. It doesn't just make people fall in love, it is also protecting the heart. So, that is something that is important to know. Do stay tuned for our next podcast. Till then, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.